There exists a peculiar form of terror that arrives without warning during ordinary moments. Perhaps you're sharing a meal with friends, or lying beside someone in the intimate darkness before sleep, when the conversation drifts toward earlier times. Someone begins describing their childhood with effortless detail, the way sunlight filtered through their grandmother's kitchen curtains, the precise flavor of birthday cake at age 7, the sound of their father's footsteps on the stairs. They navigate these recollections with the casual confidence of someone walking through their own home with the lights on. Stop right there. If you've ever felt your chest tighten during these moments, felt your throat constrict as others travel backward in time while you remain stranded in the present, then what follows isn't just information, it's the map you've been searching for. Keep reading, because someone finally understands what you've been carrying alone. You try to participate. You attempt to summon equivalent stories from your own history. But instead of memories, you encounter something else entirely a barrier as solid and impenetrable as reinforced concrete. This isn't the gentle blurring that comes with time's passage, the way old photographs gradually lose their sharpness. This is a complete severance, an abrupt termination of the signal. Your consciousness reaches backward, searching for the foundational experiences that should form the bedrock of your identity, and finds nothing but an eerie, echoing emptiness. The data points exist. You can recite addresses where you lived. You know the names of siblings, teachers, family pets. You can provide dates, enumerate schools attended, list cities where you resided, but these are simply facts floating in a vacuum, disconnected from any felt sense of having actually been present for them. The emotional resonance, the sensory richness, the subjective experience of having inhabited those moments, all of it has been surgically removed. It feels as though you materialized fully formed sometime around age 14 or 15, as if before that point you were running on some kind of autopilot, an empty vessel going through prescribed motions. This isn't ordinary forgetfulness. This isn't the common experience of losing track of minor details. You can feel the wrongness of it in your physical body, a subtle compression in your chest, a restriction in your breathing, a faint buzzing static where living memory should reside. Your brain sends out search queries into your personal history and receives only error messages in return. You observe others constructing coherent narratives of selfhood, their present selves clearly connected to their past selves through an unbroken thread, while you feel like an untethered satellite drifting in darkness, disconnected from any ground station. The question forms itself unbidden. Am I fundamentally damaged? Did I ever truly exist during those lost years? Or was I somehow less real, less present than other children? But even as you formulate these doubts, you sense something crucial. The emptiness isn't passive. It isn't simply an absence. There's a weight to it, a density that suggests active maintenance. The door to your past isn't merely closed. Something is holding it shut with considerable force, and that something is coming from inside. When you gather the courage to mention this void to others, the response follows a predictable and profoundly isolating pattern. Almost invariably, your experience gets minimized, dismissed behind a veneer of casual reassurance. "Oh, I barely remember my childhood either," they say with a dismissive gesture. Who really remembers being 5 years old? It was such a long time ago. They equate your comprehensive blackout, the total erasure of subjective experience across years of your life, with their occasional difficulty recalling whether their childhood bicycle was blue or red. They frame your condition as normal memory decay, the natural fading that happens to everyone's recollections over time, like receipts left too long in a wallet gradually losing their ink. They assume you're simply not a sentimental person, that you've chosen to live exclusively in the present moment, unburdened by nostalgia or attachment to the past. Sometimes, this misinterpretation actually gets praised. You might be characterized as low drama, or remarkably adaptable, or refreshingly uncomplicated. Because you don't reference childhood wounds or family of origin issues, because you don't carry visible baggage from your formative years, you appear enviably free. From an external vantage point, this looks like emotional health. It resembles strength and resilience. You don't seem weighed down by historical grievances or ancient resentments because you can't actually locate them in your mental landscape. To observers, you present as a clean slate, and they interpret this as virtue. What they cannot see is that a clean slate is frequently the aftermath of a scorched earth campaign. They assume that because the file appears empty, the data was never important enough to preserve in the first place. But you know the distinction, you feel it in your bones. There's a profound difference between a memory that has gently faded and a memory that has been actively redacted. A faded memory leaves traces, gives you the sensation of almost remembering, offers fragmentary impressions even if the complete picture has dissolved. What you're experiencing feels nothing like that. This is a sheer cliff face, an abrupt drop into nothing. It's the difference between a library with some missing volumes and a library that has been deliberately flooded, the shelves systematically emptied and the contents destroyed. The outside world perceives absence of clutter and mistakes it for simplicity. What they fail to comprehend is the staggering energetic expenditure required to maintain that emptiness. They see the symptom, your apparent lack of childhood baggage, and interpret it as a personality quirk, perhaps a minor neurological variation. They have no framework for understanding that the blankness isn't passive absence. It's the surface result of an enormous, invisible, ongoing project of containment. A massive architectural effort dedicated to keeping certain doors not just closed, but welded shut and guarded around the clock. This absence you carry, this void where memory should reside, exacts a price that most people, including you, most likely fail to recognize. Keeping a substantial portion of your personal timeline inaccessible requires continuous, intensive neural effort. Your nervous system is engaged in a relentless marathon of active inhibition. Though you may not consciously register this effort, it's happening beneath your awareness every moment of every day. You probably experience a baseline fatigue that sleep never quite resolves. This isn't the normal tiredness that comes from physical exertion or late nights. This is the bone-deep exhaustion of holding a massive steel door shut against tremendous pressure from the other side. Your brain is running an enormously resource-intensive background program, active repression, that consumes cognitive and emotional energy that should be available for creativity, genuine connection, simple enjoyment, or basic relaxation. Instead, these resources are diverted to the ongoing project of not knowing, not feeling, not remembering. Because you lack what researchers call autobiographical continuity, that sense of being the same person across time, with your past informing and supporting your present, you're forced into a position of manually constructing identity in real time. Most people rest on their history. Their past automatically informs their present, providing context, stability, and a sense of coherent selfhood without conscious effort. You don't have this luxury. You're constantly improvising, reading environmental cues, scanning for signals about how to be a person in this specific context with these specific people. This necessity creates a state of perpetual hypervigilance. You're always on, continuously tracking microexpressions, shifts in tone, subtle changes in the emotional atmosphere, potential threats to your carefully maintained equilibrium. Because you lack the internal anchor of a secure, accessible past to steady you, you become exceptionally skilled at reading others while remaining fundamentally opaque to yourself. You develop extraordinary social intelligence focused outward while your own internal landscape remains largely unmapped. Over time, this accumulation of effort creates a distinctive internal experience, a pervasive hollowness, a sense of living at a remove from your own life. You might find yourself strangely capable during crisis situations because your nervous system is perpetually wired for threat response, yet completely unable to tolerate quiet moments or ordinary stillness. When the external stimulation fades, when you're left alone with yourself, the static grows louder. You feel a creeping anxiety, a sense of impending catastrophe, or simply a profound, aching emptiness that has no name. You may struggle to form genuinely deep emotional bonds, not because you don't desire connection, but because authentic intimacy requires sharing a self and you're operating with a heavily redacted version. You offer people a carefully curated, present-focused presentation because the deeper layers remain inaccessible even to you. The exhaustion you feel is the friction of attempting to live without a foundation, the price of keeping the entire mechanism operational. But here's what you must understand. The nervous system is ruthlessly efficient. It doesn't waste energy on this scale without a critical survival reason. The silence in your mind isn't a malfunction. It's a highly successful, precisely calibrated adaptation. To understand why your mind is blank where memories should be, we need to examine the mechanical architecture of how memory gets stored under conditions of overwhelming stress. Specifically, we need to look at the relationship between two brain structures, the hippocampus and the amygdala. In a well-regulated nervous system operating under normal conditions, the hippocampus functions as your brain's master librarian. It receives raw sensory data of visual images, sounds, physical sensations, emotional tones, and organizes this information into coherent narrative sequences with temporal and spatial markers. It transforms sensation into story. This is the process that allows you to say, "I remember feeling devastated when I lost my favorite toy at age 6. You can place yourself in that moment, recall the context, and access the emotional experience as part of your continuous personal history. However, the developing brain of a child operates according to a brutal hierarchy of priorities, and survival ranks infinitely higher than record keeping. When a child exists in an environment characterized by chronic stress, which can range from overt danger and violence to more subtle but pervasive emotional neglect or unpredictability, the body becomes flooded with stress hormones, primarily cortisol and adrenaline. While these neurochemicals prime the muscles for fight or flight responses, they are directly toxic to hippocampal function. During moments of extreme overwhelm, the librarian essentially goes offline. The brain makes a ruthless triage decision. Recording the event in narrative form is less critical than surviving the event itself. Narrative memory formation gets classified as a luxury function that can be sacrificed to conserve energy for immediate threat detection and response. Consequently, these experiences don't get encoded as coherent stories with beginnings, middles, and ends. Instead, they get stored as raw somatic fragments in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, and emotional processing center. This creates what researchers distinguish as the difference between explicit memory, facts and events that you can consciously recall and narrate, and implicit memory, emotional states, bodily sensations, and behavioral patterns that influence you without conscious awareness. You don't retain a clear recollection of the specific afternoon when your needs were ignored or when you felt terrified and alone, but your body retains the sensory signature of those experiences, the tightness in your chest, the quality of silence in the room, the overwhelming freeze response. You carry the feeling state of your past without access to the footage. This mechanism is often termed structural dissociation, a biological firewall. Your brain compartmentalized overwhelming experiences into a separate not me category to allow you to continue functioning in daily life, attending school, eating dinner, interacting with the very people who were the source of your distress as if everything were normal. It severed the connection between your everyday self and your traumatized self. This is why you feel like you only came online later in adolescence. That was when the firewall became impenetrable, when the dissociation solidified into a stable architecture. You began running on a clean operating system because the corrupted data had been quarantined to prevent a complete system crash. But here's the crucial question that must be addressed. If this mechanism was designed to protect a vulnerable, dependent child trapped in an inescapable environment, why does your system continue to treat your current adult life, presumably much safer, as requiring the same extreme level of censorship? You have almost certainly internalized this void as evidence of fundamental brokenness. You interpret your inability to access childhood memories as proof that you're missing some essential component of normal human experience, that you're emotionally deficient, damaged, or somehow less than. You look at this blank space where your formative years should be and conclude that you are incomplete. But this interpretation inverts the reality. Your condition is not a failure. It is, in fact, a profound success of your survival system. Your nervous system didn't lose your childhood through incompetence or malfunction. It actively, purposefully concealed it from you to ensure your continued existence during circumstances that were psychologically unendurable. Consider the impossible situation of a child who fully retains clear, emotionally vivid memories of being consistently frightened, neglected, or otherwise harmed by the very people upon whom they are completely dependent for food, shelter, and survival. The psychological conflict this creates is literally unsolvable. The child cannot flee, they have nowhere to go. They cannot fight, they lack the power. They cannot even fully acknowledge the reality of their situation without risking the attachment bonds that, however problematic, represent their only lifeline. Faced with this impossible equation, your young brain initiated what we might call a protocol of strategic blindness. It made a ruthless trade. It sacrificed your autobiography to preserve your attachment. By erasing the narrative, by blocking access to the emotional reality of your experiences, you became able to smile at the parent who frightened you. You could sit at the dinner table without screaming. You could attend to your homework while your nervous system was flooded with threat signals. The dissociation allowed you to maintain the relationships necessary for your physical survival by fragmenting your psychological reality. This is not evidence of a broken memory system. This is a high-functioning protection protocol that executed its mission with devastating effectiveness. Your younger self, with the limited resources available to a child, made the only choice that would allow you to survive with your attachment system intact. That choice was to sacrifice knowing for the sake of continuing to be. However, and this is the source of your current suffering, this protection creates a profound internal contradiction. You are no longer that dependent child. You are an adult with resources, autonomy, and options that your younger self could not have imagined. Yet the protection protocol remains fully active, operating as if the original threat conditions persist. The mechanism that saved your life has become the primary barrier to actually living that life. You are the beneficiary of a life-saving operation you never consciously consented to, and the cost of your survival was the confiscation of your sense of continuous selfhood. You are alive, functional, capable, but you are also, in a very real sense, a stranger inhabiting your own body, disconnected from your own history, unable to fully trust your own experience. The war ended decades ago, but your internal defense systems remain at DEFCON 1, maintaining total lockdown as if the threat were still imminent and existential. This survival architecture doesn't confine itself neatly to your relationship with the past. It bleeds outward, saturating every dimension of your current existence. You're not simply missing a childhood. You're operating on a delay, experiencing a subtle but persistent lag between what's happening in the world and your subjective registration of it. The mechanism designed to numb you to yesterday continues actively numbing you to today. Consider how this manifests in your professional life. You likely gravitate toward high-pressure environments or roles that demand extreme functional autonomy. During crisis situations, you're strangely calm, almost eerily competent. While others panic or freeze, your system recognizes the chaotic frequency. It feels familiar, almost comfortable. You become the reliable anchor, the person who can compartmentalize emotion to execute necessary tasks. This makes you extraordinarily valuable in workplaces that prize performance under pressure. But this capability is a trap. You're not working from genuine passion or authentic ambition. You're working from hypervigilance, from the compulsive need to preemptively eliminate any possibility of criticism or rejection. You overdeliver compulsively, not because you want recognition, but to silence the internal alarm that predicts abandonment or punishment. You drive yourself to exhaustion you don't see coming because the internal sensor that should register tiredness was disconnected along with your childhood memories. You treat your body as a rental vehicle, pushing it relentlessly, ignoring warning signals, operating under the assumption that you can simply replace it when it finally breaks down. In intimate relationships, this pattern transforms into an invisible but impenetrable barrier. You're probably an exceptional listener. You trained yourself to track others' needs as a primary survival strategy. You naturally become the therapist friend, the low-maintenance partner, the person others lean on during their difficulties. You provide emotional stability, seemingly without effort. But when others attempt reciprocity, when they ask to witness your vulnerability, when they request access to your inner world, you freeze. It's not that you're deliberately withholding, it's that you genuinely cannot locate the emotional content they're requesting. You simulate intimacy by sharing carefully selected facts, offering curated weaknesses, but you remain fundamentally untouched by the exchange. Eventually, partners sense this disconnection. They describe you as distant, unavailable, impossible to truly reach. Even when you feel you're trying your hardest, offering everything you have conscious access to, they sense vast, locked territories within you. They just don't realize how much of your internal architecture has been condemned, sealed off, declared permanently uninhabitable. This mechanism also determines your relationship with time and desire itself. Without access to a linear personal past, you struggle to envision a coherent personal future. You may find it genuinely difficult to know what you actually want. Decisions get made through logical analysis, risk assessment, or the simple elimination of negative options rather than through any authentic pull toward a desired outcome. You drift through distinct life phases capable of abruptly severing connections and starting over with a facility that disturbs others. You can walk away from jobs, cities, entire friend groups with terrifying ease because you lack the roots that make leaving painful for most people. You exist in a series of disconnected epochs rather than experiencing life as a continuous narrative. Even your emotional range operates within compressed limits. The firewall that blocks traumatic pain also filters out intense joy and spontaneous delight. Everything arrives muted, dampened, as if experienced through layers of insulation. You watch others laugh with abandon or cry with full-bodied grief and feel baffled by the intensity of their responses. You wonder if they're performing for each other or if you're simply colorblind in a world saturated with emotional color. You've achieved safety from the crushing depths of original pain. Yes, but you're also barred from accessing the heights of genuine aliveness. The pattern is totalizing. The dissociation isn't an event that happened back then. It's the lens through which you experience now. You're not just remembering your past through a firewall, you're experiencing your present through that same barrier. You're surviving your career, surviving your marriage, surviving your ordinary Tuesday afternoon using the same scorched earth tactics you employed to survive being 5 years old. The original war ended decades ago, but your internal borders remain under complete lockdown, and the price is your capacity to actually inhabit your own life. The bill for this protection doesn't arrive as a single catastrophic invoice. It accumulates quietly, compounding interest on your fundamental life force across decades. You traded memory for functionality, and initially, this exchange seemed brilliant. You remained operational when you might have collapsed entirely. But the energy required to maintain the firewall is finite, borrowed against your capacity not just to survive, but to actually thrive. By continuously diverting massive neural and emotional resources toward inhibition, toward not knowing, not feeling, not remembering, you're operating on a permanent deficit for the basic act of living. This debt manifests somatically because the body, unlike the conscious mind, has no delete function. It stores the repressed terror, the frozen rage, the unacknowledged grief directly in tissue and fascia. You may battle inexplicable chronic pain, autoimmune conditions, or persistent tension in your jaw and shoulders that no amount of bodywork can release. These aren't random symptoms. They're the physical debris of your protection architecture, the biological cost of holding that door shut year after year. Beyond the physical manifestations, the cost includes a profound existential isolation. Because you present a firewall-protected, carefully curated version of yourself to the world, any love or acceptance you receive lands on the mask rather than on your actual self. You feel fraudulent even when genuinely loved because you know they're loving the safe version, the manageable presentation, not the complex, redacted reality beneath. You cannot be truly soothed because you are not truly seen. You've protected yourself from rejection, certainly, but you've simultaneously made yourself immune to real connection. You end up in a state of high-functioning loneliness surrounded by people, yet fundamentally untouched by them. The ultimate price of this survival strategy is that you've made yourself uninhabitable. You've constructed a fortress so secure that even you cannot fully enter it. You watch your own life unfold from behind thick glass safe from the wind, protected from the storm, but slowly suffocating from lack of air. The adaptation worked magnificently for its original purpose. It kept you alive when alive was all that mattered. But your nervous system has confused not dying with actually living. As years accumulate, the safety of the void begins transforming from sanctuary into prison. The silence that once protected you now suffocates you. The calculation has fundamentally shifted. The question is no longer, how do I hide from this? It has become something far more urgent and terrifying. How much longer can I afford to pay this price? How much more of my life am I willing to spend in this waiting room, postponing the actual experience of being alive? There is a way forward, but it doesn't look like what you think. The path to reclaiming yourself doesn't run through forcing open locked doors or excavating buried memories. It runs through something simultaneously simpler and infinitely harder: learning to generate the one thing your nervous system has never truly known: safety. If you're ready to stop holding the handle quite so tight, if you're ready to explore what might happen when you finally acknowledge that the person who locked that door was trying to save your life, then the real work can begin. Not the work of remembering, but the work of finally, carefully, learning how to come home to yourself. The door is still there. It's still locked. But maybe, just maybe, you can stop guarding it alone